product provided by Activision. We're approaching the end of the year, and with it comes all the annual shooters, and arguably the biggest one is Call of Duty. This year, gamers get Call of Duty World War II, this year's new Call of Duty game from Sledgehammer that ditches the recent focus on future technology and instead comes back to the era of World War II. We've seen this time period explored by Call of Duty games before, though it's been quite a few years since the last one. Let's see if this return to roots holds up. Call of Duty World War II is the first time the series has returned to the World War II time period in about 9 years, at least since Call of Duty World at War. Call of Duty World War II follows Private Red Daniels during World War II, highlighting the standout moments in history like the liberation of France and D-Day. Along for the ride is Daniel's squad, consisting of a nerdy bespectacled photographer, a smart aleck jock figure from Chicago, and a follow-the-rules-at-all-time sergeant. It's a lovable cast of characters that's extremely reminiscent of characters found in war films like Saving Private Ryan. While some of these characters have tough exteriors, you can see those cracks of humanity in their shells. These are just guys that are far away from home who are usually thinking of someone back home. Life has thrown them into this situation, whether it was by their choice or just by stroke of fate, but now they're just trying to survive. These aren't the only characters in the game though. Daniel is the main star of the campaign, but you will jump into the shoes of a few other characters with their own set of skills. For example, Daniel is just a soldier, he's not a pilot though, he's not a spy, and he's definitely not a tank operator. The campaign will throw you into mini sequences that have you play as different characters and in return open you up to new experiences in World War II. It's a much more grounded 6-hour story, all thanks to the historical 1944 European time setting, and it surely is a welcome breath of fresh air for the campaign, at least when compared to recent Call of Duty games. It's a memorable campaign filled with character development as these soldiers are being pushed deeper and deeper into the struggles of war, ultimately just trying to make the best out of a situation as much as they can. I found the campaign to be engaging and generally interesting. I played countless numbers of war games taking place during World War II, a lot of them being original Call of Duty games, and while the territory and events may be the same, the execution of the story I think is well done. My only nitpick is I think the story could have gone a little bit darker. There are moments in the game where you'll literally see someone lose half their body in an explosion, and it shows everything. With that said, things like the Holocaust are only briefly touched in the campaign, and despite it being dark and a touchy subject and literally the worst thing the Nazis have ever done, I would have loved to see it as a more prominent part of the campaign. I want the campaign to try to tackle these darker subjects, especially if it's already trying to go there. The World War II setting of course sets the foundation for the story, but it also completely warps and shapes the gameplay too. For the longest time, Call of Duty has been known as the super fast-paced, constantly jumping, ricocheting off the wall shooter. Now that definitely gets toned down a bit because this game does take place in 1944. Of course, taking place in this time period, you don't have jetpacks, scopes that can see through walls, or RC car bombs anymore. Much like the story, the gameplay is grounded in the setting, and that applies pretty much all across the board. Well, except for Nazi zombies, I guess. As I mentioned before, the campaign will last you about 5 to 6 hours, which is pretty short for a general campaign, but also the average for Call of Duty games. Your squad mates help you throughout missions, each providing a perk of sorts that refills as you kill enemies. Some will throw you some extra medkits, while another may throw you some ammo refills. Actually, speaking of medkits, they're back. You don't have regenerating health anymore, so that might be something you'll have to get used to. Anyway, when a perk is available, you'll see the icon for the perk light up above your teammate, and you can press up on the D-pad when you're near them to use the perk. They essentially replace the exosuit bonuses that would be in the future setting Call of Duty games. They're a good time period substitution for the crazy advanced warfare that's missing in this game setting. A lot of the game will have you play as Daniel, a soldier whose gameplay will fall more in line with the traditional Call of Duty gameplay. This means you'll be taking out waves of enemies, planting bombs in bases, and rescuing other soldiers. The gameplay is solid and fun, but can get repetitive in certain instances. Daniel does get some slight differences in the missions too though. Sometimes he'll get a stealth section in a mission, for example. Usually these will have Daniel try to rescue someone or take out someone without being noticed. Stealth missions where I had to rescue someone and not use my weapon usually followed a trial and error scheme of learning the pattern of enemies and then maneuvering around them. Other stealth missions would have me sneak behind the enemy and then slowly take them out with an execution takedown. Sadly, these moments weren't that great. If the enemy doesn't literally have their back facing you, then you'll probably end up just doing a normal melee attack instead and alerting the rest of the enemy team. It could get pretty annoying at times. I didn't mind having to quickly ditch my stealth plan for a firefight, but it did start to get frustrating after the first handful of times. Luckily, a bit of variety is added to the gameplay with the other characters. Throughout the campaign, certain missions will put you into the shoes of someone outside of Daniel's squad. For example, one mission will have you play as a spy infiltrating a Nazi dinner. The mission is much slower paced than the traditional run and gun gameplay, and it has a more Telltale-like gameplay behind it. Another mission will have you play as a tank operator, taking down a handful of enemy tanks with waves of soldiers behind them. These missions provide a nice change of pace from the traditional gameplay, the missions where you play as Daniel. They're nice accompanying missions that don't overpower or distract from the main gameplay, but rather complement the more common gunplay of the Call of Duty series. Speaking of gunplay, let's talk about the guns. Like I mentioned before, the setting for the story grounds the gameplay and the guns are part of it. You won't get any crazy looking historical fiction guns. You pretty much get the main set of categories of weapons, so a pistol, a shotgun, a sniper, a rocket launcher, a machine gun, and so on. Most of the weapons are solid outside of maybe the general pistol. With that said, there isn't a big difference between the different types of weapons. They mostly felt similar if they were at least in the same category of weapon. Now let's talk about the online multiplayer, as it's gotten quite a few changes in this Call of Duty iteration. There's a total of 10 maps that set you somewhere in Europe during World War II. Design-wise, they have a mix of floors that create mazes and sometimes on multiple floor levels. They can feel a bit too big for 6v6 team deathmatches at times, but primarily they focus on close-quarter combat where the players use shotguns or SMGs. The new class system called Divisions lets you choose your playstyle through each of the multiplayer offerings. Join a specific group of armed forces, and as you play matches online, you'll earn rewards that unlock new weapons and cosmetics for you to customize your loadouts. Pair this along with the character avatar customization features, and you can not only visually create a unique looking character tailored to you, but you can also build yourself a soldier tailored to you. As for the game modes available, you get Team Deathmatch, Domination, Hardpoint, War, Search and Destroy, I believe it's called Gridiron, correct me in the comments if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, Kill Confirmed, and lastly Free For All. Most of these game modes will be familiar to previous Call of Duty players, but we also get a few new ones too. War is a multi-stage mode where you pretty much get split between offense and defense. If you're on the offense side, you'll have to perform a series of sectioned off missions as you invade, capture, bomb, and infiltrate different parts of the map. You can sort of think of this as the rush mode from Battlefield for Call of Duty. The other new game mode is like a modification of Capture the Flag and the addition of Oddball from Halo. You compete as you try to claim a ball and carry it to the opposing team's goal. This is the closest we've ever gotten to Call of Duty football. Both of these new game modes are welcome additions to the online multiplayer. War in particular is the standout for me though. I think it works incredibly well with the World War II locations that this game focuses on. I really do hope we get more maps for it in the future though, as there's only 3 so far, but I'm definitely already looking forward to more. I think one of the biggest additions to the online multiplayer is the new social hub called Headquarters. It sort of reminds me of Destiny 2, and I guess that makes sense considering both are made under Activision publishing. It was honestly overwhelming at first as there's a ton of stuff going on in this hub. You'll see other live players that are online just walking around, different shops and menus in this little world that are objectives for you to do. However, after a few minutes of exploring and lurking, I started to get the hang of things. Here you can complete goals and contracts that act like time challenges for the game. In return, they reward you with in-game currency. This currency can then be spent on things like new cosmetics and weapons. Typically I like to keep to my own when I play Call of Duty online or most games online. I'm not the one to try to gather a party to play, rather I just kind of jump online to play at my own pace when I feel like it. This new Headquarters social hub though makes the game feel more connected, even for folks like me that try not to be really social online. Just walking around the social hub and seeing other live players open up their loot boxes, it sort of brought back the feeling of opening a pack of Yu-Gi-Oh cards around my friends when I was younger, filled with excitement to see which cards everyone got and how my cards compared to theirs. The last pillar of gameplay comes from the Nazi Zombies game mode, the one exception to the gameplay being grounded by the time setting. The popular survival game mode is back in this Call of Duty entry, as you explore the creepy Bavarian village. Like other iterations before it, it's a game that's completely tailored to playing with friends locally or online. You'll have to juggle fighting off zombies, activating switches, gathering power-ups, changing out weapons, and it's all just multitasking fun, or I guess hell for a lot of other players. You'll definitely have to come back and play over and over again, and through trial and error you'll learn the routes and techniques needed to continue on with the waves. I'm pretty surprised to say this, as I'm usually not a big fan of Call of Duty's visuals traditionally, but this year it looks pretty darn good. There's plenty of crazy cinematic moments of destruction and scenes of war that look stunning. Planes flying over war zones and bombs blowing up the forest that you're running through. It all just feels like you're playing an actual war film. Pair that with the fantastic looking cutscenes that give the character interactions more depth and personality, and well, it makes Call of Duty feel like an interactive history book, more than it ever has been. However, the game still has some graphical hiccups here and there. There were a few occasions where popping would occur in the environment. Enemies who had just died would immediately disappear or be floating in midair. It was an occasional eyesore and a usually pretty graphically impressive battle. The biggest problem came in the form of loading stutters. When a battle scene would end and I'd progress to the next part of a mission, you could see at times the game stutter or freeze up for a bit as the game loaded in the next part of the mission. The load time is pretty instant but definitely noticeable when it happens. As for performance, the game runs at 1080p 60 on the PS4, 1600p 60 on the PS4 Pro, and 900p 60 on the Xbox One. On the original PS4, you'll see frame rate drops as low as the 45 frame mark during the more intensive cutscenes in the campaign mode, and also during the occasional kill cam scene. On the PS4 Pro, the performance seems pretty great all across the board, with only the occasional drop during a cutscene to the 55 frame mark. The Xbox One takes the biggest hit though, at times dropping to the 35 frame mark during the heavier campaign cutscenes. At times during the campaign, it looked like the picture got softer when more intensive scenes were on display, so I assume that while 900p is the max resolution for the Xbox One version, it may be running a dynamic resolution that drops at times to keep the game mostly at 60 frames per second. And of course, for those wondering, I don't have an Xbox One X at the moment. I have to wait till the 7th to get one, so can't test it out there either. Call of Duty World War II has some pretty good music tracks throughout its campaign. They're epic sounding and they fuel you with adrenaline as you're storming the beach on D-Day. The sound effects on the other hand feel pretty mediocre to me. They sound like they were pretty much just ripped from previous Call of Duty games, and they don't sound like they were particularly redone for this game. Overall, the audio in the game though, the voice acting is definitely the best part. I'm unfamiliar with the cast behind the characters in this game, but damn do they nail their roles in the campaign. The addition of a solid group of actors performing these scenes in the campaign only further sells the touching and at times gruesome moments in the game. Call of Duty World War II does a great job at returning to the roots of the series and telling a superb World War II story. It's not doing anything particularly new in terms of the setting, it's not changing or revolutionizing the time period, but it does craft a brilliant story with great characters and emotional situations. The new social hub is surprisingly fun to interact with, even with gamers like myself that tend to keep to themselves when playing online. The new multiplayer modes like War are great additions to the multiplayer, though it left me wanting more, so I hope we get some more maps for it in the future. Additionally, performance can be an issue depending on the platform you're on. If you're on PS4 Pro, PC, or presumably the Xbox One X, you should be good with the way the game runs. However, if you're on a regular PS4 or Xbox One, you'll start to see some hits on the frame rate and the resolution specifically on the Xbox One. Luckily, those frame rate drops are mostly during the cutscenes and kill cams, not during the actual gameplay, but they're still there regardless, so I have to mention it. In the end, I think Call of Duty World War II is a solid shooter with a great story, though sometimes it can get repetitive from a gameplay standpoint. The online multiplayer is fun and I love the addition of the new war game mode, while zombies is as challenging as ever. If you've been waiting for Call of Duty to ditch the whole future setting for something different, then I think you'll be happy with this title. There's definitely room for improvement, specifically in the types of gameplay you get in the campaign as well as the performance on certain consoles, but it's still a pretty solid entry in the Call of Duty series and definitely one of the standouts in the series so far. But that does it for my review of Call of Duty World War II for the PS4, Xbox One, and PC. If you have any questions about the game, feel free to ask me in the comment section down below. And I do apologize if my voice sounds a little bit rough today. I think I'm starting to come down with the cold, so hopefully it isn't too much of an issue in this review. Regardless, thank you all very much for watching. If you enjoyed this type of content, please consider dropping a like and subscribing for more videos just like this. If there are any games in the future you'd like to see reviewed, let me know in the comments down below or just tweet me on Twitter. That link is in the description. And next week you can expect some coverage on the Xbox One X, but if there's anything you'd like to see covered specifically with the system or the games coming out next week, do let me know in the comments. Thank you all for being some awesome viewers, hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you all in the next one.